I was sitting at the back of the bar on a Saturday afternoon enjoying the quietness of the time. It had become my favorite spot a few years back when I was walking alone. I had discovered it shortly after I had arrived here after I had left Paradise, the place I used to call home. During that time, I bought the local gas station and garage for less than what it was worth. It had been on the market for 2 years. The owner was desperate to sell. I saw its potential and made a low-ball cash offer as I saw it as the perfect location for me to start over. It helped me put behind me what I had been forced to leave. The first thing I had done was built a large retail store at the front of the property facing towards the gas pumps to supply the town after the only grocery store closed down for the evening at 7 and changed the pumps to pay at the pump. In order to do that, I had to relocate the tanks. Now the pumps were seen from the store, which left lots of parking spaces for customers in the middle of our large lot. From 7 p.m. to midnight, it became the store's busiest hours. The gas bar/convenience store was now open 24/7. The garage, which was towards the back of the property, was open from 8 to 5 days a week. I would come in and work on Saturdays on special projects. The bar was upset for a while when the retail part started carrying the basics and alcohol. It was like most of these small-town operations, you would never get rich quick, but it provided a very good living and helped to add needed employment to the community. Each and every year, we were able to save better than most. With no real employment outside of farming, most young people moved out as soon as they could. After a bit of restructuring of internal store merchandising, thanks to a lady I had to hire, was done, it had become a very successful business. In a short time, it had repaid the money I had invested in as a shareholder's loan. We had to double the staff, it became that busy. On Friday and Saturday nights, we sold a lot of junk food as those leaving the bar tried to sober up a bit before going home. On Sundays, we sold a lot of cold beer at a reasonable price. I was just sipping on a straight double shot of Jack Daniels with a glass of iced water and a cut lemon on the side, having just finished up replacing a steering column in an Ultimer's old truck. It was a family heirloom and his pride and joy. It had taken me 8 months to find the damn part, and even then, I had to fabricate by hand some of the attachments for it. His family had driven the truck since the 40s, and he wasn't going to stop. I thought if he had his way, he'd be buried in it. Between 4 and 7, it was the best time to be here in the bar, for most of the regulars would be having supper. In a couple of hours, the place would fill up with the music crowd when the band started playing. The farm hands would be bringing in the farmer's daughter for fun and after-work hours entertainment. In the 6 3/4 years I had been here, I had built a solid reputation and had quite a few friends. Most of the locals had a habit of watching out for each other and would tip the person off when something out of the normal was going on. I only came in once a week to the bar, always on Saturdays at the same time, to have my one and only before heading home. It was my downtime that I used to gather my thoughts in peace. I saw them walk in. I wished I hadn't, for they automatically ruined the end of a perfect day. I would still recognize them anywhere, anytime, or any place, and still wish I hadn't. The lady was my ex's twin sister, and the young man with her I had at one time called him my son. It brought back memories that I wish it didn't. It was a time period when I learned that you could not see evil when you were living with it. Since I had last seen him, he had grown. His overall looks had changed a lot. He was looking more like his biological father. It proved to me that with time the truth would have come out no matter what. The question today was why they were looking for me now. They walked directly to the bartender to chat with him for a few. I saw her pull out a picture out of her purse and show it to him. The bartender said a few words to them, and I watched them turn and head back out the door. I was grateful for my long unkempt hair, full beard, and mustache, for they helped to give me a completely different appearance, especially since I had lost the extra weight I used to carry. No one noticed a text message I had sent out. All it said was, "They're back, be home when I can." It was about half an hour later that the bartender came out from behind the bar. He walked over and sat down. "What did they want, Tom?" I asked. "They are looking to get a message to you. They say they had heard a rumor that you were living here, and they came to check it out," Tom replied. "They are saying that a person named Willa is dying of cancer and hasn't long to live. They are looking for you because she wants to make peace. I asked to see a picture of you, claiming that I did not recognize your name. Who are they, and what do they want?" I took my Pall Mall Red 100 out, took out a cig, and ripped off the filter, sticking the smooth end in my mouth before lighting it. "The lady is my ex-wife's twin sister. The young man is my wife's son that she passed as being mine for years. Based on your years of summing people up, what do you think?" I asked. "Were they speaking the truth?" "This time reading their body language," he replied. "I would have to say that they are trying to be honest in part, but are definitely hiding the truth on something big." I nodded my head. My ex-wife and her sister had always been masters of deception, making things appear to be one way to your face, while at the same time stabbing you in the back. He got up and went back behind the bar. My mind flowed back to almost 7 years ago. When I had left that day, I had told them all I would not be back for 7 years. They had all laughed at me as if I was nothing but the fool. I guess to them I was. They learned the hard way that day, for it had been for the last time they had seen or heard from me directly. They didn't believe that I was that serious or that hurt. They thought I was just pissed off because of the joke they had just pulled. Little did they know that I had learned a few weeks earlier that our youngest was my brother-in-law's son. It set me on a path of discovery that had led to this point. At that time, they did not know that I had been given proof by a family member who said she had seen me stabbed in the back once too often by Willa and Tammy, the evil twins as she called them. In that old grand lady's eyes, they were black witches that practiced their art with pure evil. Earlier that week, before I had left, we had discovered a freshly acquired insurance policy on me for double indemnity for accidental death. If I died by accident, the payout would be $4 million. The grand dame had told me to run for my life. When I walked out of our house to my work truck, they had no clue that it was already loaded with everything I wanted out of the 16-year marriage. I drove down the driveway to the county road, turned right, and never looked back. By the time I stopped driving, I was 2 states away. I must admit that I was partly to blame as I had knocked Willa up when she was 16. I was 18 and just finishing high school. My family convinced me to do the right thing, and we got married that summer. In quick succession, the 2 other children had come along. They were still laughing at what they had done. They thought it had been hilarious. Willa said to our daughters, "Your dad will be back when he's cooled down. He really needs to get a sense of humor." A couple of hours later, my wife saw the sheriff's department vehicle drive up to the front of the house. She went to the door to greet him as he walked from where he had parked. "Are you Mrs. Willa Racine?" he asked. When she said yes, he said, "Ma'am, you just been served." "With what?" she had asked in jest because she thought it was all a big joke. When she opened the legal envelope, they all learned the hard way for the first time just how much I knew. I had heard through the grand dame that my wife had been devastated to learn that I had ended our marriage without a second thought. My lawyer and I had even listed all of our assets and liabilities. The DNA report showed it all. The affair had lasted for a year. The divorce petition had times, dates, locations, and hotel receipts which show the credit card that was being charged. The provider of the material even provided pictures of the couple in the act. During these events, Tammy had been a participant because she babysat our children and theirs so they could consummate their relationship. Inside the legal envelope, by my request, he had put in a sealed letter. When she opened it up, Willa's sister, who was there, learned I was suing her husband for back child support, marital inference, and for public slander. That's when their laughter stopped. No one thought it was funny anymore. I was no longer the joke they thought I was. It was me who was having the last laugh. After all, their standing joke was that the only thing I was good for in their eyes was making money. Everything I did seemed to turn to gold and provided cash flow. So Willa and the kids were spoiled rotten and lacked for nothing. Willa learned later that afternoon that I had sold our 3 businesses I had built from scratch and paid off all our debts. Even the 2 apartment buildings we owned were gone. I had sold them for a good profit. I had canceled all the credit cards and removed my name from all the bank accounts. I signed over my half of our home to her and took half of what we were worth in cash. All that was left for her to do was agree to the divorce. In doing that, I had knocked down our cash flow from about 10 grand a month to zero. Sadly, for Willa's sister, she had to find out the hard way the cost of using me for their advantage. My lawyer took them for everything they had before they got divorced because of the damage I had done to them all. He had frozen their assets before they were even served. Once their divorce was done, they were both ruined. My lawyer called her back into his office when it was all done and reimbursed her with a quarter of what they had lost. "Why is he doing this?" she had asked. My lawyer said it was never about the money with him. For him, it was, and still is, a matter of principle. In case you don't know, that's something you and your sister have proved you do not have. He figures by giving you this money, it gives you a chance to start over and hopes you will learn from your experience. Willa had refused to sign off on the divorce until she talked to me in person. So, we were still both in limbo, legally separated but not divorced. I had no need to talk to someone who had deliberately lied to me for years. She had to work for the first time in her life. For her, it was a new experience to learn that money seemed to disappear fast with none coming in. I had my lawyer forward anything of importance to a mailbox I rented from a FedEx retail shop, and once a week they would forward everything to my business address. I did it deliberately because I knew with the history of our lives together their bullshit would never stop. The 2 sisters loved to play with human emotions and manipulate everyone involved in their lives. Knowing the 2 of them as I did, I knew that they would plot their revenge. It was not a matter of if, but when. With their family, there was no such thing as being able to walk away. It would frustrate them to no end if they could not find me. The longer it took, the worse their payback would be. No one could be seen getting one over on them. Until now, I thought I had. With Tammy showing up, I knew their game had not come to its end. I finished my drink and headed for home through the back door in case they were watching the front. I cut through the empty lot behind and walked around the block using the back lanes towards my pickup truck. I was just unlocking the door, getting ready to climb in when the man stepped forward and said, "You're a hard man to find, Mr. Arthur Seth Racine. No doubt about it." I turned and looked at him and said, "Just how would you know that?" "My name is Peter Edwards. Your eldest daughter, Connie, is my wife." He said, "That can be a blessing or a curse for you." I said, "If she behaves like her mother. So why are you here and what do you want?" "I came looking for you," he said. "Some things need to be settled from the past." "They would be if your mother-in-law," I said, "would just sign the divorce agreement." "What divorce agreement?" Peter asked in surprise. I told him to get in his car and follow me. A few minutes later, outside the main drag of town, I turned right and drove about a mile, then did left turn into the long driveway. I stopped by the farmhouse and led him into my home office. I pulled out my divorce file, turned on the printer, and told him to make copies of whatever he needed. Peter did not need to know this was not where I lived, but I had built it for the grand dame who we hoped would finally say she was ready to move from paradise. Peter was a nice-looking young man, perhaps about 25 years old, his hair professionally styled. He carried a self-assurance that came out quite naturally. He came across to me as an educated man. The question for me was he who he said he was, and was he part of Willa and Tammy's team? He used my Wi-Fi password and uploaded everything into his laptop from my house computer. All important records were kept here with a master copy of everything in a bank box. One of the things that interested him was the copy of the sheriff's department report that Willa had to sign on the day that she got served. The only thing he got a print of was the letter from Willa's lawyer to mine. It was that lawyer's letter to mine that did the most damage to what he had been told. It laid it all out in black and white. Willa and her lawyer had agreed to the settlement of assets, but would not sign off on the divorce until I talked to her in person. The letter from her lawyer acknowledged the receipt of all the outstanding money by them. While he was doing all that, it gave me a chance to watch his facial expressions. It showed that he had no clue as to what he was learning. My documents, as they were laid out, were contradicting something that he had believed. "Do you think Connie knows?" he said. "That's a question you will have to answer for yourself," I replied. "One question for you, though. Is Willa actually dying of cancer or not?" "Who in the hell told you that?" Peter asked. "Tammy was in town today with Seth looking for me," I said. "That's what they told a bartender that I know. She is fine and is living common law with the man who was her lawyer back then. She is currently carrying his second child," Peter said. "She was the one that asked me to find you so she could start the divorce. She claims it's so she can get remarried." He opened up his cell phone and called his wife. I could hear her in the background. He then turned on the speaker so I could hear both sides of the conversation. "Connie, did you know that your mother was lying about the divorce not having been started?" Peter asked. "What are you talking about?" Connie said, "You know our dad skipped town because he was going broke. Just after he left that day, us kids went out too. So we were not home when our mother found out. Mom told us later that it appeared that our deadbeat dad had walked out on all of us. Mom and Aunt Tammy told us later that he had cleaned out what was left before he left town. If it hadn't been for our stepdad, we wouldn't have made it. I'm sending you a legal file. Get my sister to watch our baby," Peter said. "Then get back to me as soon as possible after you have read it." As they talked a few more minutes, I got up and took 2 bottles of Buds out and opened them up. I placed one in front of him. "Why didn't you tell my daughter you had found me?" I asked. "Connie and I have been married for just about 2 years. She gave birth to our son 3 months ago. Rest assured for now, I'm not going to tell anyone I've found you," Peter said. "As far as anyone in the family knows, I'm working long hours investigating a case." With that, he opened up his wallet and showed me his badge. It showed that he was a police officer for the Paradise Police Department. I opened up my laptop and opened the webpage for my hometown. Clicking the link, it took me to the police department's webpage. It proved he was telling me straight. "It was that fender bender that got reported a few months ago that gave me the lead to find you," Peter explained. "Connie put in a missing persons report on you, which got forwarded to a watch for list. The insurance company informed me about the settlement in your favor." "So why didn't you tell Connie you found me?" I asked again. "In reviewing your detailed file, it became clear that something else might be going on," Peter said. "The first question I had to ask was what happened to the $250,000 cash Willa was supposed to have received on top of the deed to the house. The second is why have all of them are lying about what really happened. Sounds like someone has been fed a bunch of lies just like I was." I said as his cell phone rang. It's my Wi-Fi. Will throw the speaker feature on, Pete said. So please be quiet. Hi dear, my daughter said. Where did you get all of this? Is it real? If it is, we all have been lied to for years. Seth has no clue about his true parentage, just as I didn't. My sister Karen is going to be shocked to see this. Mom rode hard for always standing up for our dads so much so that they're no longer speaking. This paints a different story from the lies we have been told. By the looks of it, my mom and my aunt left my father no choice. The two of them had been playing with his life behind his back for years. What gets me is the fact that divorce is not finalized because my mother won't sign off on it. This makes me wonder what is really going on. It's real. I got the information directly from your father's lawyer's widow. Sadly, I had to go out of state to find it. It seems her husband kept duplicate copies of all of his records on his home computer. Peter said, I'm sure glad he did. The files show that your mother got served the divorce petition the same day he left. I wrote out on a piece of paper, tell Connie to talk to her great aunt Josie if she's still alive. Peter nodded his head. Pete, it's now more important that we find my father, Connie said. If only to get the divorce done for him. My dad deserves to be free of my mother and her scheming ways. What happened to the money she received? If she owned the house, why did she have to sell it? The more I review the facts before me, the more I am asking what in the F was going on and why was she planning to sue him for desertion once she found him? Hey, I got an idea. Get my sister to watch our son a little longer. You go talk to Aunt Josie and let her know what we have learned. Maybe it will force her to open up, Peter said, to you about what she knew. For now, this has to stay with us because beginning to look like that there may be a strong case of fraud going on. The question that has to be asked is why your mother has been slandering your father for years. This is something I will have to talk to the district attorney about. $250,000 in cash seemed to have disappeared once it was out of your father's lawyer's hands. One final thought, don't even tell your sister for now. If the DA wants to investigate, it's better that no one knows anything. I got up from the table to get us a couple of refills to allow him some privacy until they had finished their chat. How come you want Connie to speak to Aunt Josie? Peter asked. Josie was the one that had gathered all the information on Willa and George's affair, I said. She may have never been married in her life, but she watched over the extended family like a mother hen as she raised her only daughter. Being a single mother changed her view on a lot of things. She believed that Tammy and Willa had conspired and set up the whole thing. Both George and I were being used, but what their ultimate goal was, is anyone's guess. If that is true, the question is why? Peter said, Aunt Josie's granddaughter Jody has wanted her to move in with her for years. She keeps saying not until the truth comes out. We see Jody when she comes to town with her 2 sons to visit. Well, Jody, Josie's granddaughter, leads a very private life, I said, just like I have had to. Dealing with the Withers sisters seems to come with a high price to everyone around them. Willa and Tammy have been using people for most of their adult lives. It wasn't until Josie gave me the material that I started to figure that out. Do you have anything to ask me about your children and what's going with their lives before I go? Peter asked. No, not until it's proven to my satisfaction that you are who you say you are, I said. With the history of the family, this could just another part of their game, and you are doing just what they told you to do. You might want to look into my lawyer's sudden death, because if she is planning to sue me, what makes her sure she can win? Peter's face went white. I think he realized just what kind of people he had married into for the first time in his life. We decided to trust each other enough to trade cell phone numbers. He promised to inform me if he found out anything. I stood up, walked him to the door, shook his hand as we said goodbye. Once he was gone, I cleaned up the place and locked it down. I got in the car and headed the long way home to where Jody was waiting just to make sure I wasn't followed. It gave me the time I needed to think things out. My life had improved greatly since I had left the past behind. Did I want to rehash it all over again? Did Willa and Tammy have a long-term plan of revenge because of their need to get the better of me? Knowing those two as I did, I knew I had to prepare myself for what was about to be done, because if they had run out of money, they would do anything out of greed to get it. As soon as I got through the door, 2 little munchkins grabbed my legs. I bent down and picked my 2 youngins up. At 3 and 4, they were the apples of my eyes just as much as their mother. I felt blessed to have all 3 of them in my life. My common-in-law wife Jody hollered, dinner is almost ready, so go wash up. I gladly did. Over dinner, I told her about what had transpired since I had closed the shop. Never could I have imagined how my life would be the day I left paradise for good. When I left town almost 7 years ago, I had promised the grand dame, Josie, Jody's grandmother, that I would stay in touch, and I did. I made it a point to call her every other Sunday. It had been a year and a quarter to the day that she called me needing my help. Her only granddaughter was in need of getting out of a bad marriage and needed a safe place to start over. Jody at that time was 10 years younger than I was and had no children. I really didn't know much about her as they lived on an army base and were out of state. But I owed Josie and was glad to be able to pay her back for all she had done for me. It had taken a week for me to find her a 2-bedroom apartment and partially furnish it for her. For the most part, finding a place in a small town is almost impossible. I got her one thanks to a friend of a friend. On the day of the night I was coming to get Jody, she quit her job, cleaned her bank accounts out and packed her belongings. Her husband was going to be served as soon as he came home from his latest on-base military assignment, which was a 2-week intensive training session. They were going through a drill that simulated real battle conditions, thus was away from home for the duration. It was about 8 at night when I pulled into her address with the U-Haul truck. I had just rented for the one-way trip. I had flown in quietly without anyone knowing. With a couple of her neighbors and a few of her friends, we moved what she wanted into the back of the rental truck. I was in and out of her town in less than 4 hours. When I got asked where I was from, I refused to answer, saying for now, it's best that no one knows. Jody and I began to get to know each other as we drove back. It was the middle of the night when her grandmother called her. I smiled when she said, "Yes, Grandma picked me up. You could have warned me that he was a wild-looking bushman who might look half decent if he cleaned himself up." The next day, Josie contacted her granddaughter's lawyer to have all her legal documents and communication mailed to my FedEx box. Jody had warned us both that her soon-to-be ex-husband would be a lot of trouble. I took a proactive stance for her protection. In time, we would both learn that my thinking about her situation had been right. Jody, once settled, took over running my convenience store. Within weeks, she proved to me it did need a proper store manager. It turned out to be the best thing I had ever done as it came easy to her. The changes she made with my approval made the operation that much more successful. To her, the customer's needs came first. Her personality alone brought in a lot of new business. She worked with each of the staff, assigning responsibilities and codes of conduct. It had blessed us by becoming a smooth-running operation with no staff problems. Josie had to get a restraining order against Jody's ex because of the ongoing verbal threats he kept making against her. What he did, because of Jody leaving, got him a dishonorable discharge, which resulted in him moving back to my old hometown because that's where he believed his former wife would be. Being new in a small town makes you the center of attention. So to keep some of the horny single men at bay, Jody kept wearing her diamond ring. It gave her protection when she needed it the most and the time to adjust to her new life. Within weeks, she was doing all the banking and getting the books caught up. Everyone accepted her because I had brought her in. Jody was beautiful in every way, but it was her personality and honesty that I liked. It did not take her long to size one up. She had long black hair that hung straight down, which she kept pinned back off her face. She was built more for keeping one warm on a cold winter night than anything else. I thought she would be a keeper for the next man she fell in love with. When she was asked who the lucky man was, she would say, "I'm sure you can figure that out for yourself." That's all it took to get the rumors started. It was soon believed because of gossip that we had met online. Behind our backs, she was referred to as Art's future mail-order bride. On Saturdays, because I worked alone on that day, she started bringing me a box lunch. I'm one of those who, when I am doing something, forget to take the time to eat. As a result, I had lost a lot of weight. During this time, we started building our relationship. Within weeks, everybody thought we were a couple. If one of us was invited to something, they automatically assumed the other was coming. Neither of us was looking for a new relationship, but we kind of grew into it. Josie kept us informed on things going on back home. We found it interesting when we learned Jody's ex was in a friend with benefits relationship with Tammy. The day she got her divorce was the day that we took our relationship to the next level. We had spent the night celebrating at the only watering hole in town with a group of friends. It was while dancing a slow dance underneath dimmed lights, we shared our first kiss. 6 months later, we moved in together. While the kids were having their bath together and preparing for bedtime, I stuck the small bathroom wastebasket in the sink and shaved my beard and mustache off till there was nothing but stubble left. My children were mesmerized watching me. I took the bowl and brush she had bought me one Christmas and lathered up my face, then did the same to them, much to their delight. Jody came in, seeing why the kids were giggling just as I started to shave. Her blue eyes sparkled in surprise. Our 2 little boys' faces were lathered up too. All 3 of them watched me as I finished what I had started. "Looks like Daddy is going to look like you with a nice clean face," Jody said teasingly. "Do you think I should cut his hair too?" Both of the brats said yes. I just laughed and said that I can get the barber to do on Monday. "No, I'm going to do most of it myself," Jody said, "before you get a chance to change your mind." So, after getting them dried and dressed for bed, they were sitting at the kitchen table watching their mom cut my hair. By the time she was done, I looked like a human again. There was more hair lying on the floor than what was left on the top of my head. I hardly recognized myself when I looked in the mirror. I told Jody that she had done a splendid job. Jody sent me to the showers to get all the fine hair off while she cleaned up the mess. While I was doing that, her grandmother called as my daughter Connie had just left. Jody had gotten the impression that when it came to her grandmother's sister's family, Josie was planning on going to war. Her grandmother believed it was time to take those bitches down. Connie had left her great-aunt's place with the knowledge that each of my 3 children was supposed to have received an annuity of $600 a month, each in lieu of child support which had been bought by me through Mutual Life. None of them had received any of it. Hell, it turned into being a wild night. If I had known that shaving and cutting my hair would turn her on as it did, I would have done it sooner. For the next week, I had to endure "Who are you? And what did you do?" to jokes from all who knew us. Jody got asked if she had to blackmail me to get me to join the normal in society. Jody responded with her normal humor by saying I promised to force him to have a bath at least 3 times a week. Most caught the joke, some didn't. It was interesting to learn how things were going in paradise when you believe your shit don't stink. The bird of paradise told me I was going to be sued for abandonment, desertion, and back child support in civil court. Jody and I both found this to be a hoot. They believed that if they got the judgment, a collection service could be hired to find me. When the male stork delivered the news, he thought it was a big joke. His boss and the district attorney even had hired a lawyer to act on my behalf. Then he explained they were using my situation to give them time to put everything together. Peter had estimated that Willa and Tammy had stolen over $48,000 from each of our children. They were looking into my former lawyer's sudden death with new eyes. Jody's ex-husband was now a person of interest because of it. In reviewing the cold case in relation to what I had suggested, the death by accident was now an open criminal case. If what they were finding out was factual, Willa and Tammy could be looking at 7 to 10 years as quests of the state prison. Willa's ex-lawyer, now common-law husband, could be disbarred since he was the one filing the suit. The scam had to be played out for charges to be laid. The lawyer they hired for me would be paid by them. They wanted all the records I had to come out at the end of the trail, because by doing such it would give them time to build a stronger case against them. I had to look in the mirror to see if I had the word "sucker" branded on my face. For a couple of weeks, we had peace and quiet. Then the grand dame called. Josie called us Sunday night with the news the paperwork was going to be filed on Monday. She emailed me everything she had collected over the last 7 years. She had been masterfully collecting a truckload of notarized statements, personal conversations that had been videoed about what was going on, and the name of 3 or 4 lawyers that would be great in a countersuit that she thought I should file. What stuck out like a sore thumb was the $2 million accidental insurance policy on me. Neither of us had known it still existed. That explained where some of the money went. Jody learned it had been bought 6 months before I had left. Jody and I spent half the night forwarding all the information after we reviewed it to the district attorney. Jody and I both now believe this was all being done to draw me back, so I could be set up to be taken out. The next morning, Jody called all the lawyers Josie recommended and picked one. Everything we had was sent to them by email along with a huge retainer fee. As soon as the Willa team filed the writ, I would follow up with mine and have them served before they got it to me. It was Friday morning when Jody called me. Josie was on her way out and bringing Quest with her. They had left Paradise on Thursday night, stayed at a hotel overnight, and would be arriving sometime tonight. They had left in the darkness of night in case they were being watched. It told me that things at that end were beginning to come to a head. Jody and I decided that I'd best shut the shop down on Saturday and make this a true long weekend because of family. Peter was driving her with Connie and their son. All Connie knew was that they were coming to see Jody. It was almost 7 at night when we saw the Ford Explorer pull into the driveway along with an Escape. We could see 4 adults in the 2 vehicles as they approached. Jody saw the worried look on me and took my hand into hers. My truck was parked inside of the garage, so I knew no one would assume I was there. We watched them get out of the vehicles. My wife Jody asked, "Who is all with Josie?" "That's Peter, his wife. My eldest Connie, who is holding their baby," I replied. "And Karen, my second oldest." "Are you ready for this?" Jody asked. "As ready as I will ever be," I replied as I picked up our oldest. Jody, after lifting our youngest into her arms, opened the front door. United as a family, we stepped out to greet our guests. I was the last thing my daughters expected to see. Karen instantly broke into tears. I handed my son to his great-grandmother and took Karen into my arms, holding her tight. Connie, after handing their son to her husband, came to me too. It took a few minutes for emotions to begin to normalize. Both of my daughters had turned into very nice-looking ladies. Seeing them standing there side by side was a memory that I would never forget. "It's good to see you again, Peter," I said as I shook his hand. After the introduction was done, Jody served us all a huge dinner. It was a good thing Jody had prepared extra: a prime beef shoulder roast, mashed potatoes, gravy, fresh homemade buns, Yorkshire pudding, and green beans. Hot apple pie fresh out of the oven. For dessert, put the meal over the top. It was after our kids had settled that we began a discussion about everything. First of all, Art, is it okay that I call you Dad? Peter said. I nodded my head in the affirmative. Then, Dad, the district attorney now believes that Jody's ex's car was the vehicle that was interfering with your lawyer's car when the accident occurred. We found the current owner and are in the process of having a paint comparison done by the state. If we can make the connection, he will be charged with manslaughter. Peter explained. The fire that destroyed his office happened that same night has always been viewed as arson by the fire inspectors. He can be seen in a video in the background watching the building burn. Since Willa and her lawyer had the divorce record sealed, they believe that there are no records to verify what has actually transpired to date. They filed the suit against you this week. Jody looked at me as she started to tear up. I always thought you were overprotective in moving me here. Now I see that you were not. I thought the questions you asked my grandmother seemed over the top. I realize now you needed to know what kind of man we were dealing with before deciding on a plan of action. Willa and Tammy were served with your suit on Thursday, Josie said. They had to realize with that action that I was in contact with you. We were afraid that they would be coming after me, so thus the rush trip here. Grandma, we have your house ready for you to move into, Jody said. It's been furnished, so all you need is your clothing. Got most of it with me in my car, Josie said. Connie has agreed to have the rest of it shipped to me along with all my personal things that I want to keep, like the antiques. I have given her power of attorney to sell the house and furniture. It was time for me to get out of paradise really quick. I will drive back with Peter and Connie and rent a U-Haul to bring it all out, I said. It's time we found out if our thinking is right, I said. What thinking? Peter asked. That the suit they filed against me is a ruse to draw me out, I said. With the $2 million accidental death policy they have on me, it's plain to see that the death of my former lawyer was a test to see if it could work with me. Peter, Connie, Karen, and Josie's faces went white. It was as if they were seeing the light for the first time. None had seen the game plan all laid out, nor could they figure out why. It was hearing my thoughts that tied everything together. Oh my God, they were planning your death, Dad, Connie said. Before you left town. You knew it. That is why you left the way you did. I replied with a big smile. At the time I had a good idea, but not even my lawyer believed it. It looks like he learned the hard way that I was right. Peter excused himself from our presence to make a few important phone calls. It gave my daughters, my wife and I time to get a bit of knowledge about each other's life. Jody dug out pictures of how I looked like when she first met me. Both had to admit that even they would not have recognized me. When Peter came back into the room, everyone got quiet. Willa is going to be taken into custody the day after the holiday, towards the end of the day. We can hold her for 48 hours before laying charges. She is going to be charged with 3 accounts of grand theft for stealing the annuity from her children. Peter explained. We will slow the process down, so it will take a few days for her to get a bail hearing. Dad, if you can fly in on Wednesday and rent the U-Haul to drive into town. Stop at a few of your old haunts to get yourself noticed. If anyone asks what you're doing, let them know you're here to pack up Josie's stuff. Peter explained. That way Willa will have to be communicated with via the city jail. The DA, when I told him your thinking on the whole situation, said you made perfect sense. Until your thoughts came out, we could not put it all together. When you arrive at Josie's house, we will have police protection for you until it's all played out. Peter, you are saying that the father of my children is the bait you need to draw my cousins out, Jody said. What guarantees are you willing to give me that you won't be calling me to inform me I am a widow before we're legally married? I looked at Jody. She saw the look in my face and said, damn, you're going to do it without a second thought no matter what I think. That is one thing I had to say about my Jody. She knew me better than I knew myself. Jody, Art has always been that way. That was why I called him to go save you from the unknown when you finally decided you had enough of your ex's bullshit, Josie said. Art will never ask anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself. He wants all of us to be free of the witches for good. If this is what it takes, then to him it's worth it. Graham, I'm only afraid that Art is going back into the devil's den to face the unknown, Jody replied. With a smile on her face, Josie responded, if Art was a boxer, he would be a world title holder. There's no one alive who thinks faster when he's on his feet. That's his advantage against the witches. Everything he will do will be throwing them out of their game. Jody, you need to keep in mind that Willa and Tammy have no clue that Art knows anything. Ladies, relax. I'm going to be in Peter's hands, I said. If anything happens to me, remember, he has to answer to Connie, who is my daughter. Peter knew better than to say anything. so he just shook his head. He knew just how dangerous it could be for me when I went back to paradise. Later, we got the chance to talk as the four women got into a deep discussion among themselves about what was going on. The DA figures that Jody's ex will make his move shortly after he hears you are in town. He is going to learn that it was you that came and got Jody out of the terrible marriage she was in. He will be enraged. Peter said. That info will come from Willa, who will be told that by a planted informant who will be placed in the city jail early Thursday morning. The question is, if he is captured in the act, will he give it all up to save his own skin? I asked. We looked into his past with the military, Peter said. Whenever he got caught, he admitted to it and took responsibility. He's a follower, not a leader, so I expect that he will fold quite easy. The only reason he has a relationship with Willa and Tammy is that he is easy to manipulate. The sign said, "Welcome to Paradise, a sanctuary city, population 34,823. All that did for me was verify that the city council had declared the laws of the United States of America don't apply here. Welcome to our version of the Wild West. Justice here depends on what we tell the boys in blue to do. Law-obeying citizens we charge, illegals, we look the other way. We are not prejudiced after all. This is the progressive way. The privileged working class always has to pay for the sins of others, as the powers that be had to please their masters who wanted minimum wages kept down and cheap labor around. To give them that, a lot of things were done that required those in authority to look the other way. Not much had changed in almost 7 years. Besides seeing the main drag freshly paved, everything seemed the same. I figured if I wanted to be seen, my first stop should be an old favorite haunt of mine if it still existed. Thankfully, Bob's and Betty's Burger Bar still existed. It looked the same except that it had been freshly painted. I pulled into the parking lot and got out of the U-Haul truck and headed to the main entrance at 11:15. I was just ahead of the weekday lunch crowd that would be coming in. I was banking on the fact that since I had been a businessman in my former life, that my face would be recognized. We wanted them to know fast that I was back. After taking a seat and getting a menu, I noticed a few faces looking at me. I saw a few cell phones being used. The server came over with my coffee and the cream and asked if I was ready to order. Is the Wednesday special of meatloaf, baked beans, and garlic mashed potatoes available? I asked. How do you know about that? The server asked. It's reserved for regulars and not advertised. Tell Jack, Art wants brown gravy and a few fried onions on the meatloaf, I said. The waitress looked at me as if I was crazy. I stood up and said, never mind, I will tell him myself. I walked through the swinging doors into the kitchen with the server following me and belched out my luncheon order. Jack turned and looked at me. You stupid bitch, Jack said with a grin. You're a few weeks early. Welcome back, old friend. Susan, please bring Art's coffee back in here. That way we can get caught up while he eats at the end of the prep table. Jack was the original owner's son and had never changed the name. We had been friends for most of our lives. We chatted until the rush hour was over. He had told one of the staff to call his wife to join us. It gave us a chance to catch up on things that mattered. Art, you need to know that after you left town, the wife ended her friendship with Willa and Tammy for good. She didn't like what they did or what they said concerning you and the children. Jack, there's going to be a few things happening. An arrest was supposed to have taken place last night that, if a few people's thinking is right, is going to set off a few events like starting a row of dominoes. I explained. Connie's husband Peter is working with me. That is why I'm back early. Jack looked at me in complete seriousness and said, he is one hell of a cop and as straight as they come. He put 2 of our former city councilors in jail last year for corruption. You will have to tell me what's going on later. Too many big ears around here. We saw Sasha pulling into the lot. Damn, I thought to myself, she looks good. I sat down and waited for her to come in. I knew that when she came in, she would see me from the back and not think anything was up. Jack, what up? Susan said it was important. Sasha said before seeing me. I stood up and turned towards her. Sasha, my younger sister, lost it. Her big ol' mean brother had come home. I took her into my arms and held her tight as if it was just yesterday. It took her a few minutes to calm down. Jack motioned to the kitchen staff to give us a few minutes alone. Do Mom and Dad know you're back? Sasha asked. No, and it's best that we keep it quiet for a few days, I replied. Are you here in part because Willa got taken into custody last night? My sister asked. Yes, and it's going to get worse before it gets better, I said. Once I get to where I will be staying, I will be under police protection. All I can say is that the police are looking at my former lawyer's death with new eyes. They now have reason to believe it is tied into the arson of his office. The look on both Jack's and Sasha's face said it all. With what had been happening in Paradise, it was well known that the DA who got appointed 3 years ago was trying to clean up a lot of things that had never been resolved. You're the bait to draw something or someone out, Jack said quietly. If the thinking is right, an arson, a murder, and a few other crimes will be resolved within the next few days, I replied. All were done to set up the situation where I would be forced to come back to town. The arrest of Willa and my sudden return will turn a very carefully planned conspiracy upside down. What's behind it all? Asked Jack. A $2 million double indemnity, accidental death insurance policy, I said, taken out on me. My sister walked out of their restaurant with me to my rental truck. We were standing there chatting when we both noticed Tammy driving in. Where will you be staying? My sister whispered. The Grand Dame's place. I'm going to be moving her stuff to her new home, I said. She wanted to be out of Dodge, so to speak, with all that's about to come down. Josie has left town. Why? Sasha asked. She wants to be near her granddaughter and our 2 sons, I replied with a smile. Jody and I have been together for over 5 years. We have 2 boys who just turned 3 and 4. My sister was in total shock. You and Jody how? Josie and I have been in touch all along, I explained. When Jody needed help getting out of her bad marriage, her grandmother called me. I went in and relocated her to where I lived. We believe her ex is the one who caused my lawyer's death and the arson on his office. Do Tammy and Willa know you know what's going on? Sasha asked. No, but they will begin to learn what's going down when they start making their moves, I replied as Tammy started walking towards us. Art, I need you to drop part of your suit against us, Tammy said. The DA is laying charges against Willa within 48 hours. Sorry, my lawyer says we can't because of Willa's new divorce petition claiming desertion, abandonment, and back child support, I said. Until the divorce court rules on her claims, everything has to remain as is. You can't mean that. How are we going to be able to get her bail without any assets available? Tammy said. You have got a court order freezing everything. Maybe your father might be willing to help by put his house up as security, I stated. After all, you're both his daughters. Tammy turned and walked away disappointed. Willa and Tammy's father has had nothing to do with either one of them, Sasha said. Not since he found out about Seth's true parentage. He says they turned out to be just as evil as their mother. That put another smile on my face. With that over, I got into the U-Haul and drove towards Josie's house after stopping after a few spots to pick up packing supplies. 3 hours later, I was backing the U-Haul into Josie's driveway. Using the large mirror, I backed it up as tight to the garage door as I could. After climbing out, I locked it up. Before entering the house, I walked around it to make sure it had not been disturbed. Josie had told me she had left the curtains open. I noticed that they were closed. Before entering the house, I texted Peter letting him know I had arrived and asked if he had closed the curtains. He texted back that there were cops inside the residence, and they might have. With that knowledge now known, I proceeded to unlock the front door and go inside. Mr. Racine, the officer said while handing me his cell phone. Peter Edwards wants to talk to you. Hi, Peter, I said. It looks like those who need to know. Tammy talked to me at the burger joint in the parking lot just after I finished having a long lunch. She wanted me to get the freeze lifted off of her sister's assets, and I refused. I heard, Peter said. We got Willa and Tammy on tape talking about having to move their plans up. Jody's ex Brad Press came up in their chat a lot. Willa told Tammy to let him know that you know where Jody is. That alone should motivate him to do what we need him to do. It looks like our thinking is right because it wasn't an hour later that Brad showed up. Willa told him where you were staying. Our informant who got arrested today had told her that you had come back to move Josie, Peter said. When Brad asked to where Willa said to where her granddaughter Jody is. A few minutes later, I could be seen opening up the garage bay doors. Going into the box of the van, I could be seen moving out bundles of cardboard boxes out as I unloaded all the things I needed to start packing up the house. At 6:30 in the evening, a pizza order from Papa John's arrived. I opened the door when the delivery driver knocked. The driver asked if I was moving. I said no, I had just come back to get the stuff to help a friend. Brad made his move about 11 that night. Using a car tire iron, he smashed in the lock on the front door, slipping in. Seeing the only light that was on in the kitchen, he headed in that direction after taking a 9mm gun out from beneath the back of his shirt. He found me sitting there drinking a cup of coffee. Hello, Art, Brad said. Willa and Tammy send their greetings. I'm here to find out where Jody is, so I can go for a visit. Sorry, that is something I will never tell the killer of my lawyer, I replied. Or the man who torched his office. Before you kill me, because we both know you're going to. How much have they promised you out of the insurance settlement? What makes you think I did that? He asked, taking the bait. Because you come across as the type of person they could convince through manipulation, I said, to do their dirty work for them. So how much of the $4 million accidental death policy on me have they promised you? $4 million. They told me it was only for $750,000. He said. I laughed and said, did you know that Seth is actually the son of Tammy's first husband? His face went white. You see, both George and I were manipulated and used by both of the twins for years, I said. My lawyer, while he was working on my divorce, sued George and Tammy for everything they had. Brad's face went white. That's why I knew Willis suing me for desertion and back child support was a scam, I said. The divorce was settled and only needed her signature for it all to be done. She needed to manipulate me to come back. That's when I put it all together. You're just the latest sucker to be played by them. So, ask yourself, what are their plans for you? My divorce only halted their plans for my death. You, in taking my lawyer out, brought their original plan for me back into play. You have the ability to put them away for years. Knowing them the way we do. What does your gut say? It's hard looking at a fool coming to the realization that as soon as what he was needed for that, he would be taken out. Either way, I'm screwed, Brad said. Causing your lawyer to lose control of his car and go into a tree at 70 miles an hour is manslaughter. Killing me will be life, I said. Manslaughter may get you 5 to 10, but murder is life. With me dead, they can claim you were enraged with me because of Jody and had no knowledge of what you were going to do. They set you up to be the fall guy because most accidental death policies do not cover murder. If you were me, what would you do? Brad asked. Do the dime, turn state evidence, and hope that your cooperation is taken into consideration. That way you will be getting revenge on those who were most likely planning to take you out with an overdose of drugs. I said. After all, they have to know it was your drug usage that got you a dishonorable discharge. Brad put the gun down on the table, saying, call the cops. I said, Brad, turn around, they are standing behind you. Connie watched her husband talking on the phone, wondering what was up. Peter had told her that her father was at Josie's place. The late-night phone call to his cell had woken them both up. While he was busy talking, she had put the kettle on to make them both a hot chocolate. Peter was smiling when he got off the phone. Your father surprised us all tonight, he said to his wife. Brad broke in to kill him and wanted information about his former wife. He talked Brad out of it and basically got him to confess to everything. The undercover police officers recorded the whole thing on video. Connie stood there in surprise. How did my dad do that? He told Brad some basic facts that he had no knowledge about, like the truth of Seth's parentage, Peter said. I think your father convincing Brad that the insurance policy would not pay out for death by murder was the deciding factor. Even I don't know if that is true or not, but it created the doubt needed for Brad to accept the consequences of a lesser crime instead of life without parole. Aunt Josie said that my dad thought fast on his feet, but I never expected this. What does it mean for my mother and my sister? Connie asked. If Brad agrees to testify in court against them, they will both be charged with arson, manslaughter, and the attempted murder of your father at least, Peter said. Connie picked up her phone and dialed Jody to let her know. Between the two of them, they made plans. Josie would look after the kids for a couple of days because Jody was headed to the airport to catch a plane. Connie would pick her up at the airport when she got texted the time of her arrival. When she got off the call, she called her sister and explained everything. Peter had dressed by this time and was going to the station to get a signed statement from Brad before the night was through. After her husband had left, Connie realized she was too excited to sleep. It was after 8 in the morning before I woke up. The first thing I did was to call Jack. I needed the front door fixed. He said he knew someone, and within half an hour the person was there. The front door was replaced, and a new trim put on with a new lock. The gentleman was just finishing when my daughter Connie drove in with Jody. Jody jumped out of the car running towards me, her tears flowing from her face. I realized at that moment how much I had put her through these last few days. Brad was taken into custody last night, I said. He surrendered himself to the police officers who were here protecting me. I was never in real danger. If that was so, why didn't you call me? Jody said. Why did I have to learn it from Connie? It was almost 2 in the morning before the police cleared out last night, I responded truthfully. I decided I would call you today. I took my wife into my arms and held her tight before saying, I promise I will never put myself in danger like this again. As soon as the repairman was done, we locked up after putting her luggage inside and went over to my brother-in-law's restaurant to eat. Karen met us there, as did Sasha and my parents. Jack's staff had to throw 2 tables together so we could all sit together. Jody got a proper welcome to the family from everybody. Our breakfast, when it came, was over the top. Jack was so excited about what had happened, we had it all. My parents were very excited to learn that Jody and I had 2 sons named Carson and Hunter after both of my grandfathers. I think my parents looked at every picture that Jody had of our children and us on her cell phone. My daughters opened up and told them about their bringing Josie out and discovering me. We were still there when Peter came in to join us. I could tell he looked tired. Willa and Tammy are now both in custody, Peter said. Brad freely confessed to everything, including his original intention to kill Dad. He will be charged with arson and 1 account of manslaughter once he has testified in court against the witches. Tammy and Willa are being charged with 3 accounts of grand theft, 2 accounts of conspiring to commit murder and fraud. The DA is meeting with the divorce judge who handled Dad's case right now to see if he can get the finalization of your original divorce expedited. Peter, are you telling me that Art and I are going to be able to finally get married? Jody asked, trying to get her mind to register what she had just heard. The DA took the paperwork with him when he went to see the judge, Peter explained, along with all of Dad's original divorce file. He's hoping that the judge, when he gets the full story about everything, will waive the requiring of Willa's signature, the waiting period, and grant the divorce certificate. Jody, I said, I guess I better get you a proper wedding ring set today and finally make the proposal. Everybody roared at my remark. Jody had tears in her eyes. She always believed we would, but she never expected this. Before we left, Mom and Dad made Jody and I promised to come for dinner. Jody and I went back to work on packing till about 5:30, then we headed over to my parents for a private dinner. Mom and Dad had a lot of questions. Jody explained how I had come to rescue her from the bad marriage thanks to her grandmother. She then explained how she got her first job and where it had ended up. We were still there enjoying their company when Peter and Connie showed up with my divorce certificate. It was nice to know I was now free. For when Jody was given the chance to talk, she spent it bragging about our kids and our life together. It was Mom who said we should have the wedding before the 2 of you go back. That was when my dad caught Peter's and my attention. After grabbing a fresh beer each, we followed the leader. We men ended up moving into Dad's den because we couldn't get a word in. It's been a madhouse today, Dad, Peter said. When it was learned that Tammy was arrested, people were calling with additional information. Half the district attorney's staff had to help us out. It appears that what we knew was only scratching the surface as to what the pair were up to. It now appears that the mayor will be going down with them too. What's going to happen to Willa's common-law husband? I asked out of curiosity. And how deep was his involvement of all of this? He most likely will be disbarred, but he will be busy raising their kids. Nothing we have found to date links him in with the witches. Peter said, Has anyone informed Aunt Josie? Connie peeked her head in. Dad, Jody wears a size 6 and a half ring, in case you're wondering. A few minutes later, Peter and I were driving to the mall where he had bought Connie's set. Knowing Jody's taste, I bought a 3-ring wedding set. When we got back, we were pleased to learn they didn't know we were gone. I was on the phone talking to Josie when Karen showed up with her boyfriend. With a house full of people, we all moved into the living room. The men had to carry a few chairs in from the kitchen. Dad had instructed Jody to sit in his chair. That let my mom know that something was up. So, she was watching with her eagle eyes. The room went silent when I walked over and knelt on my knees to ask my common-in-law spouse to legally become my wife. I had caught her completely off guard. Of course, she said yes. The party was on. My dad proudly said, I got almost 7 years of drinking with my son to catch up on, and Jody and Art, your engagement is the best way to start. Peter had to drive both Jody and me back to Josie's. A lot of stress and worry had been released. Friday, we slipped into City Hall to pick up the license. Jody found out she fit into Connie's wedding dress. Jack agreed to be my best man. Karen became Jody's maid of honor. The DA agreed to perform the actual ceremony. I had to buy a suit from Macy's. There was no way my soon-to-be was going to allow me to marry her in blue jeans. On Sunday afternoon in my parents' backyard in front of the family, we said our vows to the thrill of everyone. Even the twins' father was in attendance. We had told everyone that we wanted no gifts, but my ex-father-in-law pulled an envelope out of his vest and handed to me. Colin, this is not a wedding gift, it's your inheritance early, he said with a smile. The rest of my estate will go to your daughters. I stuck the envelope in my suit and forgot about it for the rest of the day. Everybody in attendance videoed the whole ceremony and sent it by text to Aunt Josie. Somebody asked where we were going on our honeymoon. Jody summed it up this way, after all we have been through. Once we got Grandma settled into her new home, our honeymoon will be a week in Florida and a week in California experiencing what Disney has to offer with our kids. Because without the family, we would not be where we are today. Just before we headed off to head for home the next day, I gave Jody the envelope. Inside was a bank draft for $100,000 with a note. It read, "Thanks for helping Karma set things straight. It had always been my belief that the twins had killed their own mother. I will savor watching them getting rewarded in kind for their deeds. So will my granddaughters." Jody put the envelope in her purse without telling anyone else. After hugging my daughters and my parents, Jody and I climbed into the U-Haul. We were heading home without a second thought, finally free from everything from the past. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.